Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
so then you and your
yes,
father escaped from the labour camp shortly before the Russians
yes.
took charge, and he then joined you and your mother in Budapest. Now, this is bordering on a miracle. You hid, or your family, in the attic space of your apartment during the day.
That's
You came
right.
down at night. And then in late
Yep.
1944, remembering the Germans had rumbled into Budapest in late 1944, early in 1944, but in late 1944, the Russians
The
then
Russians
encircled
were
Budapest.
coming.
Now, your parents decided to send you out of the city in the safekeeping of their maids, but then there was heavy
No,
fighting in the countryside, and what happened? The maids abandoned you to an orphanage.
that's right. In a little town called Miskolc, they couldn't get to where they were supposed to take me to their family, and so they thought at least I would be looked after in this orphanage. And then when we were so-called liberated by the Russians, my parents set out in the cold and half-starved on foot. And then, fortunately, a few days later, they're on a train to Miskolc, which was only 100 kilometres from Budapest. And they were sitting on a train, and this woman looked across at my mother and said, "You're Jews, aren't you? I thought all the Jews had disappeared from this area." And my mother burst out crying, and she said, we're going to Miskolc to try and find my little red-headed Suzi that's been left in an orphanage there. And the woman got very excited and said, "I come from that area. I know that orphanage," and the orphanage was bombed and the children were dispersed to different families. And she said, "Was your little red-headed Suzi wearing a jumper with Zhuzhiko embroidered in the front of a jumper?" And my mother started to cry, and she said, "That's right. Yes, that's how we sent her away." And I always think this is almost like a miracle, Alan.
Yeah,
And she said, "I know someone that took in a little red-headed child like that."
I
But it
know.
wasn't quite that easy to find me, because apparently I'd been passed around to 7 different families in the area because they're all frightened to have a Jewish child. And finally, when my parents tracked me down, I was in a barn in a farm with a peasant lady, and she had me hidden in the farm, and my bed was the trough where they feed the animals. And when Mum and Dad found me, they tell the story that most of my hair had fallen out and I was covered in sores and very dirty, but I still had the jumper on. Can you imagine how excited we were when we met each other after all that?
Just tell us then, just to finish that story for our viewers, then 3 years later, the family were on the run again, the back of a mail truck, I think the story says, to Vienna.
Yeah,
and now here she is. You're looking at her, Suzi Smeed, lives in Queensland and presenting to schools. But you then went back. Just explain the horror when you actually saw your name on the death list.
I don't know if you see that, Alan. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
That is the original list with my mother's name, my name, and my grandparents' name on the original list to be sent to Auschwitz.
So that's a death certificate.
That's my death warrant. And this Jewish gentleman at the end of the war had managed to retrieve these original documents. And they're rounding up people, and they've got your name on the list and your address. And fortunately, he kept, and we were looking for my grandparents' address, and someone told us about this gentleman, and so we went to his house and explained what we were looking for. And so he brought out this great pile of documents with our names on it, and we found my grandparents' address on that list and my name on that list to be sent to our death.
Amazing. Well, there you are.
And
There's the light.
just a little corollary to that, I said to the gentleman, these documents should be kept in a very special place. And then when I visited Yad Vashem a few years ago, he'd obviously sent the documents to Yad Vashem because the curator there gave me that copy. So I was very happy that it was in safekeeping.
It's an amazing story. This is a simple story, but a complicated and emotional and traumatic story about how the Holocaust inspired this lady you can see on your screen to write a memoir about her experiences during both war and peace. She's called the book The Courage to Care. She's no longer a little Jewish girl caught up in the horrors of the Hungarian Holocaust. She escaped death 3 times during one of the most extraordinary periods of World War II. It is a compelling story. It's published by Concord. Just go to the store .adh.tv and you can buy your copy. .adh.tv and you can buy your copy. It's a hell of a read. The Courage to Care by Suzi Smeed. Thank you, Suzi. You're entitled to good health and much happiness, and I hope we catch up again soon.
Love you, Alan, and thank you so much for all your help. You're a wonderful, wonderful man.
Thank you, Suzi. Love you too, and all the best to John. There she is, a hell of a story, The Courage to Care by Suzi Smeed.